course, slot cars always depended on the slot to carry them. In 1967, I met a fellow by the name of R.O.A.R. He's on the left of this picture, who developed a radio-controlled car. When I saw that, I blew my mind. And I had to have one like that myself. I built a car like that, and I saw so much future in that I started the Radio-Operated Auto Racing Association, which is called R.O.A.R. I was the first president, and I was the editor of the newspaper, of the monthly news bulletin that I sent to all over the place. We had an ad in Road and Track, and we had replies from all over the world. And we started this. We were the first two, and eventually this movement grew and grew until in 1969 we felt we were ready for a national championship. And this is the lineup of the cars for the very first R.O.A.R. Nationals. It was held in Garden Grove, and hobbyists brought their cars from all over the country. And then we went out to practice in Anaheim Stadium. In fact, we had a movie camera mounted on a trailer behind one of these model cars. And it looked extremely realistic as the camera was following the cars. Of course, we had to develop everything. There was no equipment, there was no association, no rules, there was nothing available in those days, so we had to do everything from scratch. We had to make the wheels, the chassis, the suspensions, we designed the bodies, everything was made by hand. And shortly after that, since there was such a demand, Norb and I formed a company called R.O.A.R, where we manufactured parts for these cars. So we were the first manufacturers in the world of parts for radio-controlled cars. And to start the engine, you would press it against a starter motor driven rubber wheel, and that would start the flywheel of the engine, and that would start the engine. They had a little 4-ounce gas tank, and they would run about 10-15 minutes on one fill-up. We had a lot of problems because there were so many problems to be solved. Very knowledgeable hobbyists said it was impossible to put a radio in a car because of all the vibration. Well, we didn't take their word for it, and we developed a lot of things. We developed a heat sink, we developed servo savers, we developed special suspensions for these cars, and always we were striving for realism, so that the car wasn't just a little guided missile, but it was actually a replica of the real car. The rules that I set up called for a driver in the driver's seat, realistic racing numbers, bodies. We even had sidewall detail in the racing tires. And we obtained Goodyear Tires permission to put their logo on. And so when we had the first national championships in Garden Grove, we had classes for Indy cars and GT class sports cars like this. There's the camera. R.O.A.R.'s little daughter Susie started the race. And we had a Le Mans start, for instance, where the drivers had to run to their cars and start the cars and then complete 50 laps. It was very exciting. In addition to raising a family, I was running the car manufacturing factory as well as the national club. R.O.A.R was growing by leaps and bounds. But still, there were not too many people who had cars that could be raced. I remember many times when we went out and wanted to have a race on a Sunday afternoon. Norm and I would have 2 or 3 cars of our own, and we handed them to spectators just so we would have more than 2 cars on the racetrack. And the racetrack for practicing was actually strips of canvas weighted down every 6 feet. So we could just lay out a track, and after the race we could carry the track home. There were no permanent tracks. Hobby shops didn't have any parts, so we had to make everything, absolutely everything by hand at home. I was third in the 1967 races. I was second in the 1968, and I was first in the 1969. And in the 1969 Nationals, the total score of the car was added up. It wasn't just the race results, but also the slalom timing, as well as the concourse points. In other words, the car had to look very, very beautiful and had to have great detail on it. And here's my trusty old R.O.A.R GT going around the track after winning the race. So the driver is holding up, or was holding up, a checkered flag. And this is R.O.A.R's version of the R.O.A.R GT. It's another Le Mans start. I'm glad that the film is holding together so well, because these are unforgettable pictures, precious when you look at them today, 20 years after this sport has been developed. They may look very amateurish, but this was slot car racing in its most glorified form. For years and years there have been many inventions and many efforts made to eliminate the slot. And finally, with the advent of radio control, we were able to achieve the impossible. My winning R.O.A.R GT. It's always a nerve-wracking moment to start the car in a race like that, because if it cools down, it can be a monster. It just simply will not fire. Or if it loads up with gas, if the ignition plug doesn't work, if the battery doesn't work, it will simply not start. This is Gary Ho and his wife. And this particular shot of mine appeared on the front cover of a Radio Control Car magazine a few years later. Roy Moody on the right, yours truly in the middle, and R.O.A.R on the left, the pioneers of radio control car racing.